This is the Open University.
Hello, my educational pumpkins. I wanted to update you on the state of play in my life, the continuous narrative that I'm making. In this case, with a wide-angle lens popped onto the front of my iPad in my new place in Berlin. A lot has happened since I last spoke to you. It was, first of all, my weekend in Guessvalde, which is the village home about 90 minutes by car north of Berlin of my host, landlord, friend, Jan Lindenberg. Actually, it was just splashed all over one of the local papers the other day in a piece entitled Lost in Guessvalde, and there was a huge picture of these two Japanese friends of ours who are running the restaurant there, which I think is called Zum Lohen House, to the Low House, and so it might be a spoiled place from as a result of people driving their cars up to see what's going on there, because it's sort of portrayed, I think, in that article. I haven't read the article, but it seems to be portrayed as a hipster paradise, or beyond hip in a sense, somewhere outside Berlin that you can go to at the weekend. I'm going to be providing little glimpses of this sort of continuous exhibition, which is my life's work of book collecting. The other thing I did, I went to Guessvalde, I spent a weekend up there, and then a few days later took all my stuff out of storage, where it's been for the last 8 years, in a Druckerei, a print works, near the River Spree, near the Tiergarten, in the centre of town. An area which is just one continuous construction site at the moment, and which is undergoing the inevitable sort of gentrification changes that Berlin is prey to, unfortunately. And so the printworks where I'd been getting an amazing deal of 15 euros per month to store all my over 100 boxes of my mostly software, mostly records and books, the odd table, electronic cables, and all sorts of junk which I've acquired in flea markets. I've been keeping that at this very reasonable rent of, less than 200 euros a year for 8 years, and I was kind of dreading having to move it out. So it did turn out to be a huge ordeal. I didn't get any help. I just rented a van. There's this company called Robin and Vincius, who are very cheap and easy to rent vans from. And you see, it seems at any given point about 20% of Berlin's traffic consists of these vans, which is people moving in or moving out, shuttling their goods across the city. So I rented one of these things, and I hate having a van. It's really awful to be driving a diesel vehicle through the city, because I always feel that I'm destroying the environment of the city with the fumes. It's not just a feeling, it's a reality, and that I could potentially be knocking cyclists off their bikes and killing, crushing toddlers in prams, or do toddlers go in prams? Anyway, crushing whoever's there on the streets, and it very much militates against the kind of society that I want to see, which is a car-free society, or a car-free city. And that really is what, to switch back to Guessvalde, that is what I saw up there. Although, ironically, you need a car to get there. There's no public there's a couple of buses, but there's really very little alternative to the car. But once you get there, you get out of your car, it's a destination. And then you can sit at wooden tables under trees and not see any cars, just see this nature spreading to the horizon. A very beautiful place. But anyway, let's go back to that later. I was moving my stuff, and I was sweating so hard doing this. There was an industrial elevator in the building, the Printworks, which is it's either going to be sold or it's going to be restored according to city ordinances, but there is kind of an ongoing dispute about it. And it was the studio home to a lot of artists, including Olaf Nicolai, Angela Bullock, Thea Georgiadze, and they were all churned out basically by this need to renovate the building. And so I was wearing these rubber gloves as I carried these rather sharp Trissa pine record boxes, which I've had since about 2009. They discontinued them in 2010. I saw one on eBay for €20. They were about €10 at the time. Fantastic shelving system because it's modular and you can store things. If you're not using them as shelves, you can use them as just storage boxes. So I took these, and I think I have 72 of these. And the rubber gloves I was wearing filled up with my sweat. I'm sweating all over, but particularly on my hands. With inside these tight rubber gloves, the fingers became bulbous with sweat. I think I must be like a couple of inches shorter after carrying all this weight. Although my back is okay, my back's in pretty good nick, I have to say. And I didn't crash the van, I didn't kill anybody, but it took much longer than I estimated. I thought it would take an hour to load the van. It took 2.5 hours. And I thought it would take, a couple of hours to unload it because there's a staircase here. That took, 6 hours, essentially, like 3 shifts of 2 hours. So I ended up keeping the van longer than I intended to. And I had to double park on the street, and then I had to kind of park up on the pavement. And I ended up doing it at 4 a.m, bringing all these boxes in, the last of the boxes, 4 a.m. And what a relief it was to get them all stacked up here. I was stacking them up as I was bringing them in. And I kept seeing treasures. That long-lost Howard Devoto interview, which I did in 1991, I thought I'd found it, but actually it turned out to be a 1988 interview I did for Music Box when Tender Pervert came out. And things like that, things which no doubt will be digitized in time and put up on YouTube. But in a way, I was dreading having to be reconciled with my stuff because I don't like being reminded how old I am. It really does give a sense of the long tail of one's life when you see how far back it stretches. I have things which I was given in the 60s. I have my very first Bible, I think, which is the first book. Here it is. Perhaps I can show with cutaway shots the signatures I put, because I didn't really read this Bible, but what I used it for was I was experimenting with styles of writing my signature. So here it is. I've actually got a neat little list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Some of them influenced by David Bowie. The way David Bowie put the open loop dot over the I in Bowie, I put over Curry, a big balloon-like dot. In the Holy Bible. The Holy Bible was my test ground for my writing. That was very important to me to keep changing. At one point I'm just Curry, again influenced by Bowie, who about 1974 dropped the David for a while. And then actually there is pretty much my current signature at the bottom there, so it's 7 incarnations of me in the Holy Bible. Quite a significant number, 7. So that goes back to the mid-60s I must have been given that Bible. And that's a long time, that's sort of 50 years ago. So yeah, it's a little bit daunting, but mostly it's just very nice to have all my stuff around me and not be living out of a suitcase as I've been doing basically for years. I've been acquiring new things, and that's been interesting because in a sense when you start again from zero, you either have the chance to become a new person, which I kind of did in Japan because I acquired, for instance, Japanese records and sampled them and tried to make new music. And I think my music is very much the result of taking sounds which are not me, which could never have been produced by me, and then turning them into something which is me, which is my aesthetic and which has been produced by me. So it's a symbiosis. And a fascination with the other, as it says in my Wikipedia entry. I'm fascinated by sex, time travel, Japan, and the other. Apparently, I don't know who wrote that entry, but so I'm sort of bringing together all my musical instruments as well. Get some cutaway shots of what I have in terms of music here. It is kind of what I'm talking about because it's also things acquired in German flea markets, for instance. This keyboard, for instance, is bellows-driven, electrically bellows-driven thing which makes an amazing sound. Actually, I used it on Mr. Consistency, that song on Hypnoprism. Here I've got my Korg Monopoly, which is a much more interesting synth than the one I had in Osaka. The one I had in Osaka was a 90s synth, which made 90s sounds, and this one is a 70s synth, and it can't do polyphony properly, and in that inadequacy is its main interest. It actually steals notes and uses different filters for the notes, and it's an amazingly interesting, faulty synth. It's got all sorts of quirks, which I can never understand how to make an acceptable chord, and in precisely that lies its utility for me. It jumps me out of my habit patterns. So yeah, it's wonderful to be surrounded by stuff which one has acquired and accumulated over the years, and it's a great leap forward for me here. It's also a great leap backwards because it kind of recreates the environment I had when I lived in Neukölln before 2010, 26 to 2010, and assembled these boxes in the first place. Go back to Guessvalde. Guessvalde was kind of amazing. It was a very happy weekend, surrounded by Japanese people in this idyllic countryside, sort of forests and fresh air. And Jan was thinking about buying a little hut. He's already living in this house, which is being reconstructed and has the attic is like a big construction site at the moment. He's renting that house from this film producer lady who is kind of the dynamo responsible for regenerating this whole village, which otherwise would have been, geriatric and crumbling. I was quite surprised that there's a church there dominating the centre of the village, which has no officiates, it has recorded bell music playing from time to time, including on a Sunday when you'd expect it to be calling worshippers into the church, but there is no ceremony there at all. There's no minister. So it's a kind of irreligious village. I don't know how it's post-Christian, I guess. And the people who go there are hedonistic, pleasure seekers, coming to ramble in healthy environments in that very German way, but also to transform orchards and forests and things into places of pleasure. So mostly highly cosmopolitan people coming at the weekends to recreate and procreate, no doubt. And but it was the Japaneseness of it that really fascinated me. There were all these Japanese artists like Shota Nakamura who had an installation. He was there, and I found that kind of fascinating to have come back from Japan myself and then to be plunged into this Japanese environment was kind of fascinating. And beautiful food there. The girls who run the restaurant doing an amazing job. But I kind of don't want to hype it up the way the newspaper has been doing. Perhaps it's all finished now. There'll be a whole different kind of clientele in there from now on because it's in the newspaper. The other thing I did, I'm going to wander around a little bit. I think. Oops. The other thing I did was I went to the art school Rundgang, which is one of my favourite things to do. The round-going, the degree show, in other words, in the Berlin Art School. I did that this weekend, and that was it was good. It wasn't as great as the Paris one for some reason. Maybe I just enjoy hanging out in the courtyard in the centre of that building in Berlin. I thought the work was pretty high. There was some interesting. Somebody was doing an installation with shells and Laurie Anderson, somehow relating Laurie Anderson's stories to a sculptural work with clay. Somebody was lying naked on a lilo in the middle of the whole floor, and the stuff, the usual stuff that art students do. But I like to see it happening around me, especially in the quiet, hedonic, toxic overload months of summer. I like to see some cultural activity before people just hang out on the city beaches, the Spree. I'm sort of acquiring some technology here. I've got a new amplifier so I can play my records, and this is an amazing breakthrough as well, to be able to go back to playing vinyl, to this the kind of sampling I was doing in Japan. I got a projector. I went to this amazing exhibition at the Haus der Kultur in der Welt, which is called Neolithische Kindheit, Neolithic Childhood, which is about modernism's integration of a kind of mythologized childhood of mankind, a primitive moment, for instance, African masks in the work of Picasso, and how, or Clay, how they went back to their own childhoods, but also the imagined childhood of mankind. But one thing that really jumped out at me was the use in that exhibition of, this was mostly vitrines with books, but very well chosen books by people like Michel Leiris, who mean a lot to me. Phantom Africa was a key text in that exhibition. But I liked how they were using these tiny little projectors. This is an LED projector made by Optoma, a smart projector, so it actually has a computer integrated in it. And so I'm mostly using it to project the time on the wall. But I'm also projecting YouTube and stuff. Basically it's kind of trying to progress towards getting a studio such it is as it is. I mean, I basically I don't need very much. I work mostly within software these days, but I'm kind of keen to stay with the Brechtian theme, I think, and that involves maybe going back to some of the Robin Archer records that were my introduction to Brecht's songs, and maybe I would like to make a cover of a song called Ballad on Approving of the World, which is an amazing, a sweeping panoramic view of Weimar society and the encroachment of the Nazis, which could be horribly relevant to our times. And it concludes, I saw the bloodstains on the pointing finger and quickly said, I like my world that way, but all that's dirtiest in your dirty world includes, I know, the fact that I approve. So it's really an intellectual, guilty intellectual, who feels he or she should be standing up to this new regime, and yet who crumbles and colludes with it. I'm just going to plunge into making music, I suppose, which is kind of my job, and also the thing I love to do.
Open University.